Imagine waking up to find that one of America's most reliable trade partners has just slammed the door on billions of dollars in exports. And not because of a war, a natural disaster, or a sudden economic collapse, but because of a single policy decision made in Washington. This is exactly what's unfolding right now. The United States has reimposed a crushing 25% tariff on Canadian aluminum, hoping to revive domestic smelting jobs. But instead of bowing to U.S. pressure, Canada, and more specifically Quebec, has flipped the script. In a stunning move, they've redirected supply chains, secured multi-billion-dollar long-term deals, and positioned themselves as the world's green aluminum powerhouse. Billions in investment are already flowing into Quebec's smelters, powered by clean hydroelectric energy. While U.S. manufacturers scramble to source affordable aluminum, Quebec is cashing in, not just from domestic demand, but from eager buyers in Europe and Asia who want low-carbon metal. And in this trade chess match, it's becoming painfully clear America may have handed its northern neighbor a winning play on a silver, or should we say aluminum, platter. To understand how we got here, we need to rewind to early 2025. In February and March, the White House reinstated and expanded Section 232 tariffs, slapping a 25% duty on Canadian aluminum and tightening quota rules under the melted and poured standard. The stated goal? Boost U.S. smelting capacity, revive high-paying industrial jobs, and secure the domestic supply chain from foreign shocks. But here's the reality. Canada isn't just any supplier. It's America's #1 source of imported aluminum, shipping over $11.5 billion worth in 2024 alone. This is not scrap metal. We're talking about critical feedstock for everything from car manufacturing and construction to aerospace and beverage cans. For decades, this cross-border aluminum flow was one of the most stable pillars of U.S.-Canada trade. The new tariffs hit like a hammer. Within weeks, Ottawa retaliated with $3.6 billion Canadian dollars in countermeasures on U.S. goods containing aluminum. Instead of negotiating from a position of weakness, Canada, led by Quebec's industrial base, began locking in massive long-term contracts elsewhere. Europe, facing its own carbon tariffs under the EU's CBAM rules, suddenly saw Quebec's green aluminum as a dream come true, clean, low carbon, and competitively priced compared to Chinese supply. And here's the kicker. Quebec's aluminum sector isn't just big, it's uniquely clean. Thanks to abundant hydroelectric power from Hydro-Quebec, the province's smelters operate at a fraction of the carbon footprint of global competitors. That means Quebec can command a premium in markets where carbon costs are now built into trade rules. The shift didn't happen overnight. Rio Tinto, Aluminerie Alouette, and the ELYSIS partnership had already been pouring billions into modernization and zero-emission smelting tech. But the U.S. tariff decision acted like rocket fuel, accelerating deals, expanding production timelines, and redirecting supply chains toward markets that see aluminum not just as a commodity, but as a climate-friendly strategic resource. In other words, while Washington thought it was protecting American industry, it may have just funded Quebec's rise as a global aluminum superpower. The numbers tell a story of a market in rapid transformation. U.S. dependence on Canadian aluminum. In 2024, U.S. imports of Canadian aluminum totaled $11.49 to $11.61 billion, the largest single-country source for America's aluminum needs. This was not a market built on convenience. It was built on necessity. Decades of cheap, clean Canadian production kept U.S. prices stable, while domestic smelting capacity declined due to high energy costs. The tariff trigger. When the Biden administration revived the 25% Section 232 tariff in early 2025, the immediate effect was predictable. U.S. buyers faced higher input costs. For industries like automotive, construction, and packaging, even a modest bump in aluminum prices translates into billions in added expenses. And that's before we account for retaliatory tariffs from Canada. Canada's countermove, redirecting supply. Ottawa's 3.6 billion Canadian dollar retaliation package hit U.S. goods containing aluminum. But the real power play was strategic, redirecting Quebec's aluminum exports toward Europe and Asia. Why? Because under the EU's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism (CBAM), Quebec's hydropowered smelters qualify as low-carbon producers, a massive competitive edge over coal-powered Chinese and Indian suppliers. Quebec's investment windfall. Two flagship projects have defined this surge: Rio Tinto AP60 expansion, Saguenay, 1.4 billion Canadian dollars to scale up low-emission smelting capacity using advanced AP60 technology. Aluminary Alouette, modernization, Septiles, 1.5 billion Canadian dollars investment, backed by a hydropower contract through 2045 with Hydro-Quebec, securing cheap, green electricity for 2 more decades. Combined, these already confirmed projects total 2.9 billion Canadian dollars, 2.1 billion US dollars. While some media outlets and commentators hype a $12 billion deal, the verified figure today is closer to $3 billion, with room to grow as more contracts are signed. Technology as a force multiplier. The Elysis joint venture, Rio Tinto plus Alcoa, backed by Apple, is pushing zero direct emission smelting tech. Already in use for select Apple products, this innovation positions Quebec not just as a bulk supplier, but as a premium brand in the aluminum world. Market ripple effects. Europe. Premiums on low-carbon aluminum have begun adjusting downward as buyers anticipate new Quebec supply. United States. Price spikes in automotive and beverage. Can markets are creating political pressure from manufacturers. Asia. Japan and South Korea have signaled interest in long-term supply agreements, especially for aerospace-grade alloys. This is not just a tariff dispute. It's the early stage of a global supply chain realignment, with Quebec at the center of the chessboard. Winners: Quebec and the Canadian aluminum industry. Quebec didn't just survive the tariff shock, it leveraged it. By doubling down on its green aluminum advantage, the province positioned itself as the go-to supplier for markets under carbon constraints. The 2.9 billion Canadian dollars in confirmed investments is just the opening move. With hydropower contracts locked in until 2045, Quebec's smelters enjoy both cost stability and a marketing edge that competitors can't easily replicate. Europe's demand for low-carbon aluminum is growing fast under CBAM rules, and Quebec fits that need perfectly. That means European buyers are not just willing to switch suppliers, they're willing to sign long-term deals at favorable prices, knowing they're future-proofing against carbon penalties. Losers: U.S. manufacturers and consumers. While Washington framed the tariff as a way to protect American jobs, the reality on the ground tells a different story. U.S. auto manufacturers, beverage companies, and construction firms are facing higher input costs overnight. And for consumers, that translates into more expensive cars, homes, and even canned goods. The pain is compounded by the fact that U.S. domestic smelting capacity can't scale up quickly. It's constrained by high energy prices and environmental permitting challenges. The Aluminum Association has been clear. Recycling and efficiency gains are a faster, cheaper way to boost self-reliance than tariffs. But policy has gone the other direction, leaving industry scrambling. Winners: European and Asian buyers. Japan, South Korea, and the EU now see Quebec as a stable, clean, and politically aligned supplier. This not only improves their supply security, but also diversifies away from Chinese and Russian sources, which are often subject to sanctions or volatility. Losers: U.S. trade leverage. By alienating its top supplier, the U.S. has weakened its own negotiating hand. In trade disputes, leverage comes from having multiple strong, reliable options, and Washington just pushed one of its best partners to deepen ties with America's competitors in other markets. In short, the winners here are playing the long game, locking in supply, capital, and technology for decades. The losers are trapped in a short-term cost spiral with limited tools to reverse course without political fallout. This aluminum standoff is more than just another trade spat. It's a live case study in how climate policy, energy strategy, and geopolitics now intersect. The U.S. tariff decision may have been intended to boost domestic smelting, but the structural realities of the market suggest it has instead accelerated Quebec's rise as a global green aluminum leader. Over the next 12 to 24 months, we can expect three key developments. Deeper Quebec-EU integration. Expect Quebec's export portfolio to shift further toward Europe, where CBAM carbon pricing will only strengthen demand for hydro-powered aluminum. This could push U.S. buyers into an even tighter supply corner. Technology-driven premium markets. With ELYSIS and other zero-emission smelting technologies scaling up, Quebec could transition from a bulk supplier to a premium brand in aluminum, commanding higher margins and locking out higher-emission competitors. U.S. political backlash. As higher aluminum costs ripple through autos, housing, and consumer goods, political pressure will mount to either roll back tariffs or fast-track recycling and clean energy projects for U.S. smelters. The question is whether Washington will pivot in time to regain lost ground. For businesses, the lesson is clear. Energy source matters. Quebec's aluminum dominance rests on clean, stable, cheap hydropower, an asset base that no tariff can touch. For policymakers, the takeaway is just as stark. Trade policy without an energy strategy is a gamble, and in this case, the House, or rather the neighbor, just won big. If you've been following this story, the data makes one thing clear. The U.S. may have underestimated its northern neighbor's ability to turn trade pressure into a global growth strategy. The aluminum market is shifting under our feet, and if America doesn't adjust, it might soon find itself paying not just more per ton, but paying in lost influence too. So what's your take? Was this a bold defense of U.S. industry, or a self-inflicted wound that handed Canada and Quebec a historic win? Drop your thoughts below, share this breakdown with your network, and let's keep this conversation going.